Be me Dominic, mid-30s. My job title is something long and boring, but it boils down to this. I'm a senior project engineer for a major power utility. I design and manage upgrades for the electric grid, substations, transmission lines, power plants, the big stuff. My team is small, mostly guys who have been doing this for decades. There's Alden, a man who looks like he could wrestle a bear and win. He's our lead on physical infrastructure. Then there's Leonidas, a quiet guy who is a wizard with control systems and SCADA. He can make a power grid do things it was never designed to do, all from a keyboard. Our world is concrete, steel, and high-voltage electricity. It's a world of physics. Things either work or they don't. You can't argue with Ohm's law. We take it seriously. If we screw up, millions of people lose power. Hospitals go dark. It's not a game. The work environment is what you'd expect. Direct. To the point. No fluff. If an idea is bad, we say it's bad and explain why. It's not personal. It's about making sure things don't explode. We've been working like this for years. It's efficient. It's effective. And then she arrived. Sometime last spring, the company hired a new head for what they called the Committee for Inclusivity and Development. Her name was Genevieve. She came from the corporate HR department of some other faceless company. She had this polished, professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. With her were her two lieutenants, Maya and Kira. They worked in departments that didn't really produce anything tangible, like internal communications and corporate branding. The three of them were a unit. They always walked together, nodding in agreement with each other. At first, it was just emails. Lots of emails. New company-wide policies on conscious communication. Mandatory online modules about creating a welcoming workspace. We all just clicked through them, picked the obvious answers, and got back to work. Standard corporate nonsense. But then it started to escalate. Genevieve's committee announced they would be conducting cultural audits of every department. She explained in a big meeting that some departments, particularly the technical ones, might be suffering from ingrained cultural toxicity. She never said toxic masculinity, but the way she looked at me, Alden, and Leonidas when she said it, we got the message. The engineering department was her primary target. We were the old boys club that needed to be fixed. Their first real move was to insert themselves into our meetings, all of them. Genevieve sent out a memo stating that a representative from her committee must be present at all project planning and review sessions. This was to ensure diverse perspectives were being considered. The first meeting they attended was a critical one. We were dealing with an old substation that was having serious issues with harmonic resonance. It's a complex technical problem. If we didn't solve it, a series of transformers could overheat and fail cascade style, taking out a huge section of the city. We were deep in discussion, looking at schematics and load flow diagrams. Leonidas was explaining a potential software fix for the capacitor banks when Maya raised her hand. We all stopped and looked at her. She had this very serious expression. She wanted to know if we had considered the socio-emotional impact of the substation's audible hum on the local community. The room went completely silent. I just stared at her. Alden looked like he was trying to mentally calculate the tensile strength of the conference table. I tried to be professional. I explained that the hum was a byproduct of the transformer operating, and that while we monitor decibel levels to ensure they're within legal limits, our primary focus right now was preventing a catastrophic equipment failure. Her response was that my answer was very technocratic and dismissed the lived experience of the residents. Genevieve chimed in, nodding sagely. She said this was a perfect example of the department's cultural blind spot. We were so focused on the machines that we were ignoring the people. The next 45 minutes of a critical meeting were spent on a circular discussion about community outreach and empathetic infrastructure design. We got nothing done. The problem with the substation remained unsolved. This became the new normal. Every technical discussion was derailed by non-technical, irrelevant questions. Kyra once argued that the color palette used in our SCADA system interface was intimidating and aggressively masculine. She suggested we change the reds and yellows used for critical warnings to something more soothing, like pastel blues and greens. Leonidas just looked at her, deadpan, and said the colors were industry standard for a reason. Red means danger. People need to react instantly. The next day, he got an email from HR about his unreceptive communication style. The real trouble began when they started meddling with the projects themselves. Genevieve's committee now had to sign off on the formation of any new project team. We were planning a major upgrade to a transmission corridor. It was a tough job, requiring specialized skills. I put together my dream team: myself, Alden, Leonidas, and a few other senior guys I trusted. The project plan was rejected by the committee. The reason? The team composition lacked diversity. I was called into a meeting with Genevieve. She had a stack of corporate printouts in front of her. She informed me that my proposed team was unacceptable. It was all men. I tried to explain that this was a highly specialized job. The people I picked were the most qualified individuals in the entire company for this specific task. I even pointed out that there were only a handful of female engineers with the right background, and they were all assigned to other critical projects. Her expression didn't change. She told me that merit is often a code word for privilege, that by only picking people who were like me, I was perpetuating a cycle of exclusion. I was instructed to reevaluate my team selection and to think outside the box. We lost 2 weeks on the project timeline because of this. We had to bring in a junior engineer from another department who had no experience with high-voltage transmission lines just to satisfy a diversity quota. Alden had to spend half his time babysitting her, making sure she didn't accidentally do something dangerous, which slowed the whole project down. Morale on the team plummeted. The guys felt like their expertise meant nothing. They were just cogs in a machine, and the machine was being run by people who didn't understand what we did. We stopped talking as much during lunch. The jokes stopped. Everyone just kept their head down, trying to avoid drawing the attention of the committee. Any attempt to push back was met with a formal complaint. Hostile work environment. Resistant to change. Undermining corporate policy. Management was useless. They were terrified of Genevieve. Any time we brought up a concern, they would just give us some weak platitude about the importance of inclusivity and tell us to find a way to work with them. They were so scared of a lawsuit or a bad article on the internet that they gave her committee unlimited power. The breaking point came a few months later. We were in the middle of a serious heat wave. The grid was under immense strain. We were working 12-hour days, monitoring everything, trying to prevent brownouts. One of our oldest power distribution centers, a real relic from the 70s, was overheating. Alden and his crew were out there in the blistering heat, trying to install temporary cooling systems. In the middle of this, we get a Priority 1 email from Kyra, not from the system operators, from the committee. She was demanding an immediate halt to all non-essential work at the distribution center. Her reasoning was that the current situation was creating an inequitable distribution of physical hardship. She had noticed that the field crew, which was Alden's team, was all male. She claimed that this was evidence of a system that defaults to placing men in physically demanding roles, while women are excluded from these opportunities. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I called her. I told her that this wasn't an opportunity, it was an emergency. I said Alden's team was out there because they were the ones qualified to do the work, and if they stopped, a whole district could lose power in 100-degree heat. Her voice was cold. She said my panicked tone was exactly the kind of masculine-coded gatekeeping she was talking about. She ended the call by saying she would be escalating the issue with management. I slammed the phone down. I was shaking with anger. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was dangerous. Their cluelessness was going to get someone hurt or cause a major failure. That night, I met Alden and Leonidas at a small bar near the office. We just sat there for a while, staring into our drinks. Alden was exhausted. He looked 10 years older. He said they barely managed to get the cooling systems online before a key transformer tripped its thermal limit. He mentioned that while he was working, one of the committee's junior members was walking around, taking pictures and asking his guys if they felt empowered by their labor. Leonidas was just quiet, which was even more worrying. He said he had spent his afternoon arguing with Maya about the problematic implications of our automated load-shedding protocols. She believed the system should ask for consent before temporarily cutting power to a neighborhood. We all just looked at each other. It was hopeless. We couldn't fight them. We couldn't reason with them. Management wouldn't help us. We were trapped. We talked about quitting, finding jobs somewhere else. But we had all been at this company for over a decade. We had built things here. We had a sense of duty. Leaving felt like letting them win. We ordered another round. We were venting, throwing out crazy ideas. And then, as Alden was complaining about all the useless, dead-end tasks that got pushed on his department over the years, I had an idea. It was a stupid, risky idea, but it was the only thing I could think of. I looked at them and said, "What if we stop fighting them?" They just stared at me. "What if," I continued, "we agree with them? What if we tell them they're right?" Alden asked if I had been out in the sun too long. I started explaining. They're constantly talking about how we engineers have a narrow technical mindset, how we ignore the human element, how we lack the skills for communication and social outreach. They want more responsibility. They want to prove that their way is better. So, we give it to them. We give them the projects that nobody wants, the projects that aren't about engineering, but about dealing with endless complaints and bureaucratic nightmares, the projects that have been sitting on the books for years because they are impossible to solve and offer no reward. A slow smile spread across Leonidas's face. Alden started to chuckle. We spent the next hour brainstorming. There were two perfect candidates. The first was what we called the Briarwood Substation Complaint File. Briarwood was a substation built in a rural area that had since become a wealthy suburb. For 15 years, the residents had been complaining. The noise, the aesthetic, the imaginary radiation. We had done dozens of studies. Everything was perfectly safe and within regulations. But they didn't care. They just wanted it gone. Dealing with them was a nightmare of endless town hall meetings and angry letters. It was pure public relations poison. The second was the Sector 7G Archive Project. Sector 7G was a part of our grid that was ancient, a patchwork of equipment from different eras, some of it dating back 50 years. The documentation was a mess. Half of it was missing. The other half was on paper, stored in a damp basement archive that no one had entered in a decade. The project was to audit, digitize, and catalog everything in that sector. It was a monumental task, tedious, thankless, and with zero visibility to upper management. It was a career dead end. These were not engineering projects. They were swamp monsters. And we were going to hand them over. We worked out the plan. We wouldn't just give them the projects. We would champion them. We would praise the committee's unique skill set. We would frame it as a golden opportunity for them to apply their holistic, people-centric approach where our rigid technical methods had failed. We would use their own buzzwords against them. It was malicious compliance on a whole new level. The next morning, I requested a meeting with the head of our division in Genevieve. I walked in with a folder and a solemn expression. Alden and Leonidas were there, too, for support. I told them we had done a lot of soul-searching after the committee's recent feedback. I said we realized that we had been too defensive, that we had let our engineering pride get in the way of progress. I saw a flicker of triumph in Genevieve's eyes. I then presented the two projects. I described them not as technical challenges, but as socio-cultural and organizational ones. The Briarwood file was an issue of community trust and restorative justice. The Sector 7G archive was a challenge in preserving institutional knowledge and overcoming legacy barriers. I finished by saying that my team lacked the necessary skills in communication, empathy, and organizational dynamics to succeed. But her committee was perfectly suited for these challenges. This was their chance to shine. My boss, who just wanted the problems to go away, was ecstatic. He saw a solution that made everyone happy. Genevieve was beaming. She probably thought she had finally broken us. She accepted immediately, with a speech about how she was thrilled to see our department finally embracing a new paradigm of collaboration. She promised to deliver results that would make the whole company proud. The projects were officially transferred to her committee's oversight that afternoon. As we walked out of the meeting room, Alden clapped me on the back so hard I almost fell over. We didn't say a word. We just smiled. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait. The first week was blissfully quiet. The office felt like it used to. We could have technical conversations in the hallway without looking over our shoulders. We actually got a huge amount of work done on the transmission corridor upgrade. The junior engineer we'd been forced to take on was even starting to learn things, now that Alden had the time to properly mentor her instead of fighting bureaucracy. Meanwhile, Genevieve's committee was in full swing. They held a big kickoff meeting for their two new flagship projects. They invited people from half the company. There were posters and pastries. Genevieve gave a presentation full of slides with inspirational quotes and stock photos of diverse people smiling. She talked about synergy, paradigm shifts, and actioning a new collaborative framework. It was a masterwork of saying absolutely nothing. For the Briarwood substation project, their strategy was pure PR. They weren't going to engage with the technical realities. They were going to solve it with feelings. Maya was put in charge of this. Her plan was to hold a series of community listening sessions. She set up a booth at the local farmers market with a big sign that read, "We hear you." She had suggestion boxes and handed out pamphlets printed on recycled paper about our company's commitment to the environment. The residents were not impressed. They didn't want pamphlets. They wanted the low-frequency hum that they claimed was making their dogs anxious to stop. They wanted the ugly chain-link fence replaced with a nice brick wall and some tasteful landscaping. They wanted the substation, a critical piece of infrastructure powering 50,000 homes, moved somewhere else. Maya's reports from these sessions were tragicomic. She wrote about how she was building a dialogue and creating a safe space for community feedback. We heard from a friend in accounting that she had expensed a ridiculous amount for calming aromatherapy diffusers for the town hall meetings. It did not work. The residents got angrier. They felt they were being patronized. Their complaints to the state regulators doubled. On the other front, Kara was tackling the Sector 7G archive. She approached it like it was a simple filing problem. Her first step was to try and hire a team of interns to digitize the assets. She got the shock of her life when she finally visited the archive in the sub-basement of the old facility. Leonidas and I made a point of walking by her office the day she came back. Her shoes were caked in mud. There was a cobweb in her hair. She had a look of pure horror on her face. The archive wasn't just old files. It was a tomb. Decades of neglect had taken their toll. Some shelves had collapsed. There was water damage from a leaky pipe. Many of the documents were practically unreadable. It wasn't a job for interns with scanners. It was a job for a specialized restoration crew, followed by engineers who could actually understand the faded 50-year-old schematics. She put in a budget request for an external contractor to handle the restoration. The quotes came back, and they were astronomical, far beyond the committee's discretionary budget. Her request was denied. So for weeks, the two flagship projects were completely stalled. Maya was stuck in an endless loop of hostile community meetings. Kyra was staring at a locked basement door, unable to even begin her project. Genevieve's confident smile started to look a little strained. The tone of her emails began to change. At first, it was subtle. An email to me with a subject line like, "Quick question on harmonics." The body of the email would be a long, rambling question from a Briarwood resident about electrical pollution, and she would ask if I could provide a simple layman's terms explanation for her. I would reply with a polite professional email. I explained that it was a complex topic, and, to avoid misinterpretation, it would be best if all technical inquiries were handled by the project team. I then reminded her that her committee was now the designated project team. I CC'd my boss on the reply. Leonidas got similar emails from Kyra. She would ask for any old documentation he might have on Sector 7G, since the archive was temporarily inaccessible. He would reply that all official documentation, old and new, was stored in the central archive as per company policy. He was not authorized to keep personal copies. We were a brick wall, a polite, smiling, helpful-sounding brick wall. We were just following the rules. We didn't want to overstep our bounds or undermine their leadership. We used their own words. We didn't want to impose our patriarchal engineering mindset on their holistic process. About 2 months in, the desperation became palpable. Genevieve started scheduling interdepartmental sync-up meetings with us. She would book a conference room for an hour and invite our whole team. The agenda would be vague, something about ensuring alignment. In the meeting, she would try to casually turn the conversation into a technical brainstorming session for her projects. She would say things like, hypothetically, if one were to approach the acoustic dampening issue at Briarwood, what would be the first step an engineer might consider? I would look at her and say, "That's an excellent question, Genevieve. It really gets to the heart of the challenge you're facing. What does your project plan say is the next step?" She would flush and change the subject. These meetings were a complete waste of time, but they were also a sign that our plan was working. They were drowning, and they knew it. The quarterly performance review was approaching. This was the big one. All the department heads had to present their progress to the executive leadership team, the CQO, the VPs, everyone. In the week leading up to it, Genevieve's committee went into a frenzy. They were working late. Their lights were always on. They weren't doing any real work on the projects. They were building a presentation, a massive, glossy, 100-slide PowerPoint deck. We knew because they kept asking people in the graphics department to help them with charts and infographics, charts with no data, infographics about abstract concepts like stakeholder synergy. The day of the review arrived. The main boardroom was intimidating. A huge oak table, leather chairs, and all the company's most powerful people looking serious. My presentation was straightforward. I showed the progress on the transmission corridor upgrade, on time, under budget. I highlighted the good work of the team, including the junior engineer. I answered a few technical questions. It took about 10 minutes. Then it was Genevieve's turn. She walked to the front of the room, radiating a kind of forced confidence. Maya and Kira sat behind her, looking nervous. Her presentation began. It was exactly what we expected. Slide after slide of buzzwords and stock photos. She talked about the journey of discovery on her projects. She presented word clouds generated from the angry feedback of Briarwood residents as qualitative data. She showed a picture of the locked archive door in Sector 7G and called it a symbol of overcoming institutional inertia. She didn't present a single concrete result. No metrics, no milestones, no progress. She spoke for 20 minutes, wrapping up with a grand statement about how the committee was laying the foundational groundwork for a new era of corporate-community partnership. She smiled, expecting applause. There was only silence. The CEO, a sharp man in his late 60s who had started his career as a lineman, leaned forward. He wasn't smiling. He looked at her and asked a very simple question. "Thank you for that, Genevieve. It's a lot to think about, but I'm not clear on the actual status. What progress has been made on the Briarwood complaints in the last 3 months?" Genevieve's smile faltered. She started to talk about the listening sessions again. The CEO cut her off. "I understand. You've been listening? Have the complaints gone down?" She had to admit that they had, in fact, gone up. He then turned his attention to the archive project. "And the Sector 7G audit, what's the percentage of completion?" Kira looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Genevieve cleared her throat. She explained that they had encountered unexpected legacy challenges and were in the process of re-scoping the strategic approach. The CEO's patience was clearly wearing thin. "So, 0?" he asked. Genevieve didn't answer. The silence stretched on. It was excruciating. Finally, she played her last card. She tried to shift the blame. She said that the committee had faced significant cultural resistance from the engineering department. She claimed we had been uncooperative, that we were hoarding information and refusing to provide the technical support that only we could offer. She made it sound like we had actively sabotaged them. Every eye in the room turned to me. This was the moment. The CEO looked at me. "Dominic, is this true? Has your department been uncooperative?" I took a breath. I looked directly at him. I kept my voice calm and even. "No, sir," I said. "That is not true. We have respected the committee's ownership of these projects from day one." I continued. "We recognized that these projects required a different skill set, one focused on communication and outreach, as Genevieve so effectively argued when she proposed taking them on. We deliberately stepped back to allow her team the space to implement their innovative methods without interference from our more traditional, technical-first approach. I paused for a second. "However," I said, "if you are asking for my engineering assessment of these two problems, I can provide it." The CEO just nodded. "Please do." I hadn't prepared any slides for this. I didn't need them. "The Briarwood issue," I began, "is caused by an aging 150 megawatt transformer. The magnetic core components have loosened over time, which creates a constant 120 Hz hum under load. The sound is well within legal limits, but it is audible. The only permanent solution is to replace the unit with a modern sound-dampened transformer. The estimated cost is $1.5 million. Installation would take approximately 3 weeks. The capital request for this was first submitted 6 years ago and has been denied every year due to budget constraints." I looked around the room. The VP of Finance was suddenly looking very interested in his notes. "As for the Sector 7G archive," I went on, "it contains schematics for outdated pneumatic and mercury arc rectifier systems. These are highly specialized. A full audit would require a team of 2 senior engineers with historical systems knowledge and would take approximately 6 months of dedicated work. It's a significant manpower investment for a low-priority, non-critical sector. That is why the project has been deferred for so long." I finished. Those are the technical realities of the situation. I sat back down. The contrast was devastating. Genevieve had spoken for 20 minutes and said nothing. I had spoken for 2 minutes and explained everything. No one looked at Genevieve anymore. The CEO stared at his notepad for a long moment. Then he looked up at the VP of Operations. "Get that Briarwood transformer replacement approved today. Dominic, I want your team to manage the project, effective immediately." He then looked back at a pale-faced Genevieve, "Your committee's current mandate is under review," he said. His voice was ice. "We'll be in touch." The meeting was over. We filed out of the room. Genevieve, Maya, and Kira stayed behind, frozen in their seats. We walked back to our section of the office. No one said anything until we were back in our own space. Then Alden let out a long, slow breath he seemed to have been holding all morning. He looked at me, and he just started to laugh. Not a loud laugh, a quiet, deep, relieved laugh. A week later, an internal memo was circulated. The Committee for Inclusivity and Development was being reorganized. Its budget was slashed. Its authority to oversee or approve projects was revoked. It was absorbed back into the HR department, where it became responsible for organizing the company picnic. Genevieve resigned a month after that. The email said she was leaving to pursue other opportunities. I heard from a friend she's a freelance consultant now, or something like that. Maya and Kyra are still here. They keep to themselves. They make eye contact with no one. Their power is gone. We got the new transformer for Briarwood. Alden's team installed it. The week after it went online, the number of complaints dropped to 0 for the first time in 15 years. We never did get to the Sector 7G archive. It's still on the back burner, still a swamp monster for another day. But things are different now. Management leaves us alone. They trust our judgment. We're free to do our jobs. We never set out to destroy them. We never filed a single complaint. We were never rude. We just smiled, agreed with them, and gave them exactly what they asked for. We gave them a real project, a real problem. We gave them responsibility, and it crushed them.